Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges, as he explores turning the page on his life and yours.
Welcome, friends, to the next chapter with Charlie. You know, we live in a day and culture almost devoid of traditional elders. Our society seems to contend that, yes, people get older, but they don't get wiser. And then, adding to that, most old people seem to have little concern about this serious conundrum. Our very special guest today, modern elder Marc Cooper, is doing something about it. In his latest book, Older to Elder, Marc holds a conversation with his audience about both the value and traits of a modern elder in a highly individual culture. And he talks about wisdom and experience from what has been historically known as elders. So enough intro. Let's get Marc on the show to explain. Marc Cooper, it's such a treat to have you on the next chapter.
Yeah, it's a new playground. I'm having fun so far.
Yeah, we don't need to tell the audience all the fun we've had, but it has been 30 minutes of fun trying to get on the air.
Yeah, it's life is, one of my teachers once said, life is the ultimate guru. And I kept that in mind for a long time because, life is inconvenient a lot of times. And then how do I deal with the inconvenience? And if I can deal with the inconvenience rather than reactionary, but more consciously in a way that allows me to get value out of it, that it doesn't become an inconvenience, it becomes a teaching, then there's a model that I can use that where life doesn't impact me like it usually does. And I think elders develop that skill set.
Yeah, and it comes with, it's something that does come with age, doesn't it? It comes with experience, with the gaining of wisdom.
I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I think there's a better opportunity because you've been through life experience and have had the school of hard knocks, the failures, the successes, the dramas, the traumas. You've had a life, and life teaches all the time. First of all, life doesn't care. That's the first axiom you got to get. It just people have died in your world. And, 2 years later, they're disappeared. They're not in existence anymore. Life goes on. That's something that's never stops under all circumstances. So, can I be in that life in a way where I don't feel I'm being battered by it, but rather even the issues that come up and the situations that come up, because that's life, I can deal with them in a new way. And I think elders, especially in growing old, have a way of dealing with aging that is really much different than the culture deals with aging.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Certainly is my experience. Before we get into elderhood, I would like our audience to know just a bit. I know you're very humble, and so you won't talk much about it. Mm-hmm. But talk to me just a bit about your highly productive first half of life and how that prepared you for the next part of life.
I'm sure I said this morning to you in our call, but I used to look at explanatory principles of why I did what I did. I'm going to do this because there's a because that led me to the next event and the next event and the next event and the next event. School, college, dental school, graduate school, consulting, transformational leader, all that stuff that I've done. And now I find out that it's more likely that I've been called. Now, that sounds really strange and somewhat cosmic, but I began to let go of all that past to hear who I really am and what I'm really here to do. And so none of the past really matters in that new calling, because it doesn't care that I did this. That's past. So I am somewhat reluctant to go through it because I'm 80 years old and we don't have time to go through any of that. We go through some of it, but none of it really determines who I am in the moment. It just gives some information about it. I'm an elder. I don't need a past. I need to be an elder. And I need to be an elder with whom I am, and anybody I'm with. And elders are not past-based. Elders are future-based. Elders are looking at a future of compassion and health and doing the right thing and values and principles and cosmic laws that need to be installed. And so it's so much easier for me to talk about that than to talk about what I did in 1984.
Perfect. I'm in. Tell me something. I have a quote that is a very influential quote for me, and I'm wondering what you think of this quote. I heard it in probably 1985-ish. And this, you are who you have been becoming. I like that. That talks about life as a teacher, life as a guru. You are what you've been doing. That does not focus on your past, but your past has influenced your future. And now, as a result, that means the correlation is that means I will become who I am being today. So today is determining what I will be in the future.
I have it a little bit shifted, but I just
figured. That's why I asked.
I don't think it gives me access to being. It gives me thought about it, but it doesn't give me access. I ask a different question. So I ask people if, number one, is if they ever had a real experience of being with an elder. And of course they have, but they may not have recognized it. So you try to move that to a place where it's somewhat experiential. Because everyone's been with some elder in some place, particularly with your religious background and all of that. There have been a number of elders that have influenced you.
Right.
And then I'll say, is that something you want to be? That quality, that characteristic, that peace, that joy, that humbleness, does that speak to you? Does that elder speak to you? If it doesn't speak to them, I need not go further, because it's not in their groove, as jazz musicians would say. But if that I could see that in my life, and then I tell them to take a look at, well, what would that look like in your life? What would be different about your life? What would be different about you? So I move people in terms of speaking about elder to a future of where they can see themselves as an elder. If I can start there, then the question is, well, how do I get there? Well, that's a whole different, that's operational. But they can see it, if they can feel it, that's the first gift. And then the second one is, well, what do I need to do to get there? Well, there's a few entities, a few people that are you're doing that by these podcasts. They're listening. They're seeking. If they have a future that they're seeking for, then that would be somewhat different than just seeking. Why am I listening to this? Why am I engaged with this? What is the calling that I can't quite hear? What's the whisper that I need? And I got to put in my hearing aids here. I got to hear this. So the answer is out there. So an elder, when you're moving from elder to elder, you know that your past just doesn't have any juice left. It's just, it's my past. The usual, as you probably are aware of, is that, people retire, they got 10,000 a day. And then they go into what I call their holiday stage, which is 18 months of visiting the grandkids, taking the cruises, going to wherever they, Paris, whatever they want to do. But after about 18 months, 24 months, something shows up as missing. Something is not present. They keep on repeating the same thing, and it's not giving them aliveness, and it's not generating something for them. And that's because they've always been purpose-driven, and now they lack a purpose. So then, from an elder's viewpoint, if you send them back to their old purposes that they had at work and family and all that, that's the wrong direction. So there's something available now, which is really the ultimate gift of being an elder, which is higher purpose. Oh, I see. There's something bigger than me here that's calling me. There's something, I don't know, there's something I want to be doing that I'm not doing. There's something, there's some way I should be being with people that moves what I intend forward. And it's kind of, gauzy. You can't quite see it. But you have the feeling. You have an intuitiveness about it. That's an elder. That's getting ready to be an elder.
I like that. I like that a lot, in that you have a feeling. I have a calling, and it has become clearer. It's becoming clearer, but it is still, the actual end result is not very clear, although I know a direction. I'm, like Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. He gets out and he just says,
exactly,
we're heading east. How do we know? I don't know. That's it. We're heading east. We're not going any other direction. And also I wanted to comment and get your feeling on this, that what I have done with, the need for purpose is that I believe in purpose, but what I had to eliminate wasn't purpose, but I needed to eliminate the necessity to be productive. And that, in producing whatever it is, and I need to be making something, doing something. I felt upon retirement, I felt useless and bored. And the only way I could be useful was to be productive and not relational, not influential, not inspirational, which are words that drive me today. Inspiration drives me. Influence drives me. Productivity does not drive me.
No, that's so appropriate. And the shift from older to elder, the past loses its grip. However, you need to be drawn to a future to exit the past. And that's what elders have, is the future present now. In the work that I do with people, we start with their death. Most of the people that I have spent time with podcasting are about living to a ripe old age, increasing health, lifespan and health span. That's all good. I love that. I'm engaged in that. I'm glad they're doing what they're doing. But I think there's a third leg to the triangle, and I'll call it mind span or existential span. Who I am on that third, the base of that triangle of lifespan and health span, who I am down here influences those two dramatically. It's obvious if you look at the numbers. If you went to college and you had better access to healthcare because you were a professional, you will live longer and you will be healthier. That's valid information. But the quality of life, there's no quality measure there. It's just numbers. I'm saying my state of mind as an elder is different than the state of mind as an older. There's something available here where I can see life, myself, death, dying, end of life, all that differently. I will die. Most of the people live in the world of death is a if, not a when. I know I'll die sometime. When an elder really begins to confront, you are going to die. So there's some Buddhist principles that I deploy, which is this one of impermanence. Nothing lasts. Jesus said it too, I believe, of rust and moth. So we really act out of that. If I'm going to die, what do I want my life to be going backwards? What do I want to leave? So when you start with the end first, sometimes that changes because older usually starts with, I'm going to go from here if something happens. It's going to happen.
You sound like a 1980s Stephen Covey. Begin with the end in mind.
Stephen Covey had a lot of influence in my life. A lot of people did. He was an elder.
Yes,
he spoke elder language. It was just, it spoke to me. That's part of the calling. So, Parker Palmer and the people he spoke to me. There are people that, if you really listen, when I work with people to get to their higher purpose, it isn't to be learned. It isn't out there. A higher purpose lives from the inside out. It has to be revealed. It has to be uncovered. It has to be, it's always been here. But if they look back carefully on their lives, it's always been in play. Their higher purpose has always been in play. They've always been in play. It's just that it's taken different forms. But now they can hear I live in Mexico. And, and it's really half the time. And the people down here are extraordinary. It's extended family. It's loving. It's kind. People care about each other. It's a wonderful community, a small community that I live in. But they can't say the word K or X. Those words in Spanish just are hard to say. So when
they don't exist in Spanish. Yeah.
But they do now, because now they go, Señor Marc. So they understand that you change your language, it changes the relationship. That they can say my name affectionately. It changes who I am from who they are for me. That they spend time trying to figure it out. So elders bring that kind of presence of kindness to it, and intentionality, and that. All the things we're speaking about is another motivator of why I'm doing this, and I don't want to avoid talking about it. But I think the world is in pretty deep trouble. And the older you get, and you and I, once we reach this stage of life, we want to make sure that the world gets better, not worse. Somehow that calls us to be intentional about what we're doing with our remaining time.
You mentioned something. I want to go a little deeper. I want to get into what we do with our remaining time, but you sort of led to just a bit back, and I think it's very, very essential, and that is talking about the process for elderhood. And you mentioned to me that it begin may be not the right word, but it certainly has to do with a mature understanding of the deepest self.
Yes. I don't think you can know others until you know yourself. That's another part that occurs if you bring death back into the picture, when you know you're going to die, you get to be brutally honest with yourself. You stop this place of self-deception. You start telling the truth about what's really true for you, down to the deepest. But you also have a capacity to forgive. And so if you can get to a place where who you have been and who you have been and you move it from the subjective to the objective, when it just becomes, oh yeah, I did that and I was that and all that, when you can let go, that's the beginning of the elder process. It's like, wow, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to be that anymore. I don't have to talk that way anymore. There's a certain sense of emancipation that's coming over you. Like, I don't have to be restricted to who I have been. There's choice here that I can now make. When you're older, like, you have more permission. You don't have to, you can be more of yourself. And so when our process begins to happen, and there's a good opportunity to move to the path of elder rather than follow the path of older down dictated by the culture and the insurance companies. So, yeah, I think it's recognizable, but you have to be open. People know it's calling you, and you're opening to it. And
I want to question something right along that line. Was something you brought up that really, a couple of things. you use this phrase, and I think this has to do with understanding yourself. No distinction, no power. That's powerful, but it requires explanation, Mark. That's a very deep thought.
I'll give you an example. Because when I was in dental school, I had a radiology professor, Lauren Katina, who I loved, by the way. He was one of my favorite teachers. And you would go and you would look at these teeth x-rays and jaw x-rays. And then he'd ask you a question, and you say, you didn't see it. And then he would point to it. He'd say, see that lesion there? And all of a sudden, every time you looked at an x-ray, you looked for that. It distinguished it in your experiential knowledge, not just in your intellectual knowledge. And so a distinction is not only what is known, it's how it is known. You and I know elder differently than other people now. You and I know life differently than other people. You know spirituality different than other people now. It's distinguishable in a way for you that gives you better access to it and power. The more that it's distinct, the more power you have with it.
And the more power, would a synonym for that be influence? The more distinction you have, the more influence you have?
I think they need to be distinguished. Thank you. I think they need to be distinguished. Influence means I have to be able to be someone who is held as influential. I can have a lot of power and it doesn't go anywhere. But if I don't change who I am with other people, if I don't become, and what the term now I think is influencer, if I'm not seen as one of this, but you need power to influence, but it isn't a guarantee that you can.
Yeah. I had a very interesting experience about a month ago. I was at spring training. My son's a baseball player. I was at spring training.
What team?
He's with the Cleveland Guardians. He's playing tonight against the Padres, so I'm going to San Diego.
Oh, how exciting.
So I'm going to San Diego to watch him play. So that will be...
What position does he play?
He's a catcher.
Oh, what a hard position.
It's a beautiful position. I mean, he
controls the game. That's the king of the chessboard, is the catcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And he has two assistants that he has hired that live with him, and he's not married, and they take care of his life. They do, he gets 3 days a month off, works 10 hours a day. He just has no time to do what most of us have time to do, because he's either resting or working out or at practice doing whatever he does. And I noticed this last time, Mark, I intentionally, as I'm moving into elderhood slowly. I've been sort of a year or two in the process of it. And I intentionally said much less. Our family is philosophical. They will debate and they're not argumentative debates. They're thought debates. They're thought experiments that they're testing on one another. And then when I would talk even personally with his guys, he calls them the boys. And when I would talk to the boys, I really played role of observer and of deep listener. And, I think it was so powerful. I had more influence when I said something. I'm not in favor. I'm not an active advice giver. Here's what you ought to try. I like to say, what if? Have you considered? Have you thought of? Is this an option for you? And let them, they have the honor of making the decision of what they want to do. I'm just proposing new alternatives. But being an observer and a genuine eye contact, face to face, someone else enters the room, I don't turn my head and look at the other person. If I'm speaking to Mark, I'm speaking to Mark. That's it. And that was just a powerful situation for me and for them.
I spend a whole day on that one. So I'm going to say some things that are hard to believe. But number one, listening is more powerful than speaking. The elder understands that principle. In fact, if I listen intently enough, the words that they say are what I want them to say. I ask questions to hear something that's already there in me, and I'll know it intuitively when they say it that that's their truth as well. So you bring out the truth in people about themselves, and that is a real service. So keep on asking the second and third question. Most people listen to respond, not to. So, and the other part that people are unaware of is that listening is access to being. If I want to know who I am, it's reflected in how I'm listening to people. It's a direct reflection. I'm in line to get a car at an airport, and the line is extremely long, and the people in front of me are extremely slow, and I'm impatient, and it's hot, and it was an 8-hour flight, and you could go through the whole storyline. Yep, okay. And then I look at who I am in line, and what is that giving me? So, and how when I hear people talking, and I'm coming from my impatience and my, upset and anger and my judgment and evaluation. And then I shift to, people are people. One of my principles is people are people and you're one of them. And I forget, I'm one of them.
It's just all the same. You're all the same in line with the same anxieties, the same frustrations, and...
Yeah, but there's a key in that listening which is more responsible it's about the way I'm listening or the way I'm saying it rather than that's the way they are.
Right.
I become self-determined. And you talked about self-awareness. You talked about self-understanding. Elders engaged in that. That's their playing field. The more I can understand myself and change that. You can't change anything until you see it. So it's really about seeing who you are at the moment that gives you that response. To be what you call the observer or the witness. To be that in life. About you, too. Ask yourself the second and third question.
Oh, I tell you, there's, as the reflective, responsive person, there is few people that are more observant about themselves. I am... all the time, too much.
That's not observing, that's worshiping, or judging, or evaluating, or assessing. You're not witnessing yourself, you're in yourself. And that doesn't give you any freedom from self. We're so self-restricted by so many different areas of particularly in our culture. If you're not young, what value do you have? And so you walk into that condition of being obsolete, of being unwelcome, of being a burden, of being expensive, of being, let's warehouse these people and get them out of the way. We're not seen as an asset. We're seen as a liability. And so you walk into that culture and you try to and being an elder in that culture is challenging. Because you're not listened to. And so can you be the person that generates the capacity of all of that to hear you, to hear your wisdom, to hear to do what you just did, to do an elder conversation about really looking at oneself and underneath it oneself. And so there's a deal when I talk about elder, it's just not for everyone. It's for people who want to develop themselves in such a way when they sit down at a table with decision makers They don't feel intimidated. In fact, they feel welcome. And can they be that person that is not trying to prove themselves, that their same competency and the same knowledge in all their past? That when people introduce people at meetings, and they go into this long history of them, that's never who they are sitting at the table. But if you can sit at the table as an elder in a way that people start to look at themselves about how they're deciding this decision. Are they coming from selfish or are they coming from common good? What about their, if you can move a conversation towards a larger capacity to see the greater humanity that is really at stake and that they have a job there, if you can inspire, but not through your words, through their insight, then you're an elder. Then you're doing elder work.
You know what works for me in that? What makes me tolerable, I think, listening and one action I find more powerful than any other, and that's kindness. They're just and by kindness, I simply mean being nice. There just is. There is something about being nice, about saying thank you. If somebody does something that you think is admirable, to let them know that was such. The other day I go to a Starbucks every day, and they know my name. They got me. We speak Spanish. Buenos dias, Carlos, and we will talk about that and. There was a man sitting in a car in the passenger seat when I got out to get the coffee, and he had the door open and he was just standing there. And then when I got back into my car, he looked at me and he says, "See you, God bless you." And so I thought, those are nice words. And then I stopped my car and rolled down my window and said, those are such kind words. Thank you for thinking of me in light of that. That exactly. Means a lot to me.
Yep. It's not a frequent conversation in our culture. We don't feel blessed, and we are blessed. The opportunity to be alive is unappreciated. One thing you get is when you get older, you appreciate life a lot more. When you become an elder, it becomes sacred. You were given a gift, and you're trashing your gift. Supposedly, at least the numbers I heard were to be born, the odds are 1 out of 400 trillion. That's 12 zeros. That means you hit the lottery, man, the big one. You got to be born. And when you get people, particularly through our culture, late middle age, they don't feel blessed. They don't feel life is worth it. They have all kinds of issues that need to be resolved for them. In fact, that's what life becomes about, is they're resolving their issues. It isn't about improving life. They think success will improve life. So they drive themselves to greater success, which drives the opposite, which is dissatisfaction. So it's a terrible cycle that people put themselves in. Elders want to break that cycle. Maybe there's more to life than trying to get the house bigger or the car.
What do you think of death, Mark? How does death impact your life?
Oh, it's present every day. So number one is we, in our work, do work on death every day. So we have people do death plans. We have people do things where if this was your last day of your life, what would you do? What was the last week of your life? What would you do? Well, you start doing that stuff. You start living as though you really are going to die. Death is an informant. He's an ally. And he does. He's going to come. No kidding. He's going to be there. And, so we also spend time with people in the death trade. There's some really extraordinary, great work about how to be with death in a new way out there. Good references, good people. We want to move the fear into a different level of understanding about the opportunity that death is, as opposed to the fear that everything ends and it goes away. There may be something beyond what we understand. There may be something that is beyond what you and I understand. But we have a difficult time being with that which we cannot know. Elders begin to relax that a bit more. I can be with the uncertainty. I can be with wonderment. I can trust something else. Maybe I just don't know, and maybe I don't have to know. So death for me is freedom. So, okay.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You know, it's my time with the late medieval Christian mystics has taught me just a whole different view of what we call the source of God. That there is a huge unknowingness to the source. There's a huge unknowingness to what is going on. And the more, and I am comfortable with that. I am comfortable with the fact that love is preeminent in my philosophy, theology. Love, I mean, it's not just kind of about love, it is all about love. And that the transition from this life to the next life will be increased love, will be more intimate love without all of the despair and tragedy that we have now. So I have, you know, Mark, I say it now because I'm you know, I may be 75, but I'm very healthy. I'm in good shape. And I have, right now, I really have no fear of death. Now, you give me cancer tomorrow and I could be my feelings about that could be very different, but I don't fear death. I'd look at her as a reality that is it's a transition for me to the next phase, whatever that may be. And I certainly don't know. I can't predict what that is.
Well, I can tell you our government doesn't live that way. They don't live as though they're going to die. They live to be reelected. So death is a powerful ally in determining how you interpret your life and what you want to do with it. For most, you know, if we look at health span, most people are living into their very late 70s. Most now will be early 80s, but it won't be long before the 90s are common factors. AI will take care of medicine in a huge way. So we're going to live a while. And what are we going to do with that time? And if you take a look around, someone has to be able to go out there and begin to do the repair work because it's broken. So I would say that what elders do is, you know, their ultimate intent is to repair the world because, man, it could work. There could be love. There could be peace. There could be compassion. You watch these videos on some of these feeds, and what melts people's hearts is when you see good deeds being done.
Yes.
Like they pick up a puppy dog or whatever that is for them.
Look for the good people. In tragic times, look for the good people and see what the good people are doing.
Well, elders help create good people.
I don't know. It's a subject that interested me that we were talking before. I don't know if it goes way back to our discussion, but I want to talk about dharma and karma. I like the calling and the outplaying of the calling that you brought in the distinction between dharma and karma. Can you explain that to us? I think that was very helpful.
Not as well as a Buddhist monk, but I'll give it a try. I'll give you my interpretation. So please, if you know more than me listening to this, apply what you know. This is how I interpret. If there is karma, that means that you are born into a lifetime that is somewhat predetermined to work out some of the things that occurred in your past that you were inept or out of integrity with, time to learn your lesson in this lifetime. So you have a karmic path. Now, and you also have a karmic determination. Your parents were not by chance. Your life was not by chance. Your birthday was not by chance. Has some lineage to it. And, it's here. It's a inbred plan. It's DNA-ish. There's a moment when you hear the calling, when you begin to see that there's something else that is able, independent, or including this, that will allow for a different future than just the karma would give you alone. And I'll call that dharma. That you have a capacity to do work that feels right for you, but also impacts the future and allows people to be more free, self-expressed, more whatever they need to be, more human. It is the best way to say that. So the Dharma is about the possibility, and the other is about, the life you have to deal with. So it's dharmic. It's cosmically informed, not from the bottom up. It comes from the top down. That would be Dharma.
So it is a calling. And the calling may not be what you have perceived your karma to be.
My karma was perfect. I had take a look at your history. I could go through mine about immigrant parents from, and then their life and where they had to go to in a culture that was not enabling. They had to carve out. So their karma is my karma too. I have to carve out. I don't have silver spoons in my family. We have shovels to dig with.
You have what?
Shovels to dig with. We had to work. But they pulled them. They were that. Their karma was to drive out of that situation into a world where freedom was available to them. So there's certain values that are karmic that are really good, that are helpful, that are, that's why you got those values. No, karma's not bad. It's just, it's your karma. But you can relate to it differently when you're in Dharma. Oh yeah, that was. I went to dental school, and it was really labor intensive to do the. It just is. It's a professional school, and they had high demand and all of that good stuff. But the discipline I had to learn. The karma served me well. I had to learn how to really study. I had to learn how to really remember. I had to learn how to understand some of the many scientific concepts. And the other part was the technical skill at that point was so demanding to be able to be dexterous enough to be able to deliver that outcome with a patient that's terrified, and to have all of that going on, that was wonderful training for me in my elderhood. It was useful. So Dharma doesn't negate the karma. It imbibes it. It includes it. It's but it doesn't interpret it as a punishment. It's more, it's more insight. It's more, okay, that makes sense. That fits.
So do you think your karma is changing or becoming clearer?
It doesn't matter, actually, because I'm living my dharma. I have a chance to alter the way the world works. Someone asked me, we were out to dinner with a couple people, and they were all talking. This is a small community of expats. Canada and the United States. And a lot of people I live in a little casita. Some people have one of those, they have all that good stuff, the big ones. And they're all talking about what they do or did. And they asked me what I'm doing. And I said, well, my job is to change the world. That's what my job is. I want to change the world. And this is the best part for me. And they kept on eating. They didn't ask me another question about that. It was
you got to be kidding me. That was just sort of like,
this must be an idiot. And, at first, what came out of my mouth long ago and for a very long time was what would work over there. Now what comes out of my mouth now is what works over here. Am I fully self-expressed? Am I embarrassed? Am I hiding? Now, I need to be socially appropriate. I understand the way the game is played, but I don't need to compromise myself. I need just to say it the way I need to say it. And how they respond is how they respond. But I can tell you that in my experience with my groups and the people that I work with now, if you are living into your higher purpose, your quality of your life is far different than if you live in accord with the past and what the culture dictates. That's obvious.
Your mission in life, or your call in life, as you feel your call, really is to change the world. And you have, you gave me, I would like to talk to you about your Pareto, your 20% rule. And my call is to change my world. I feel I have an impact on whatever my world is, and has that expands.
Yeah.
And that expands to other people. But you have a different call.
No, I don't think it's an either or, you see. I think it's an A and D. The more I know Mark, the more I understand Mark, the more I forgive Mark, the more I find him humorous, Mark, the more that I can laugh at himself, Mark, the more that I can forgive Mark, the more that I can love Mark. That needs to be there in order to have this occur on the other side in the world. But you can't, and there's a Buddhist principle called interbeing. And in that principle, everything is so interconnected that if you change you change it. And so I believe that is also true. That is also in functioning. That is one of those cosmic laws that you are.
I totally believe that.
Yeah. Rumi says, you're not a drop in the ocean, you're an ocean in a drop.
I've not heard that. That's wonderful. You know what I'd like to change subject just a bit, in that, speaking of elders, and that the lack in the American society of elders, in Asia, elders are much more important. I don't know about the whole of Europe, but I know in Italy, elders are very important in Italy, that the children take care of their parents, they live with the parents, and they do work with the parents. So eldership is important. But the place in the United States where eldership is huge is in the indigenous population. And you have worked a lot with indigenous Americans and elders are huge. Elders and ancestors are huge in that population.
Okay. It's a bifurcated answer. So number one, elder is a way of being. So when you're around Native Americans or South American elders, there is a presence there. You could call it spiritual, you could call it cosmic, you could call it they are connected in a way that I'm not connected. There's something available in them that I wanted personally for myself, but I saw if other people had that way of being, that their life would shift in a way that they would be more contributory and participatory and so much less psychological and all the things that come with that. But then there's our culture, and they don't want elder because they confuse it with older. there's no listening for elder. So you use the word, you introduced me as a modern elder, and I would like to change that word to a contemporary elder.
Okay.
I'm contemporary. I'm at the moment. I can be in a business group dealing with whatever consorted issues that they have, because I did it as a living. So my conventional wisdom about how business works and how leadership works and all the things I did is still very functional, still very applicable, but I'm not seen as older. I can now be an elder in that conversation with them. I can bring my being up with that because I've been there. I've done that. I understand failure. I understand bankruptcy. I understand when the market changes. I understand that stuff. So I can listen in a way that is, they know that they're speaking to someone who understands. And they understands in a way that gives them a different viewpoint of what they understand. So I gain their respect. I gain their listening. And once I can do that, things change. So I have to be the one to be responsible to be heard in a group like that. I have to be contemporary. Yet I have anchors and anchorage to all that legacy of thousands of years of elder now. So it's a melding of those in a way that will allow it to be heard. And I'm responsible to be heard. I'm responsible for how I'm listened. It's, all the complaints I hear about ageism and all this stuff, and, learn how to talk to them. Be the one who speaks in a way that they hear that you are not useless, that there is something valuable that you have to contribute, something that would allow the world to operate differently than it does now. That's, do your job. Anyway.
But that assumes intentionality. Those, in my bubble who retire and live on a golf course, there's not much room for intentionality for elderhood.
Yeah, no, we talked about, and we can start completing about this. I look at the 80-20 rule as a cosmic law, because it always works out that way. No matter what I say, when I really got into sales a very long time ago, and I looked at my numbers all the time, and when I understood that 80%, that out of all the calls that I'm going to make, 80% are going to say no, and 20% are going to say yes. So the impact of a no was very much less. It was okay, because I know I have 20 up there. It's a triangle. I have to get to the tip of the triangle. Yeah.
Tell me, in the Native American culture, I feel a calling with very little knowledge to invest my energy or invest some energy in sort of what I'm calling a shamanistic Christianity. As a shaman, is a shaman
let's call it
an elder?
Call it a healing. So we talked about this before. So a shaman is a healer. And that's what they do. They heal. Usually through ceremony, but also medicinal ways. That's how they do it. So in most cases, shamans are elders, and at least in my experience. And, they look at a way to heal the tribe or the community in a way that is about community health as well as it's about personal health. They have an overall healing. They're healers. And they have some magic. But their magic is who they are. And it's not only what they do. So
and that is the role of elder. You said this phrase, the raison d'etre, that I so endorse a way of being. I can't write about life without writing about a way of being. It's more than a thought process. It is almost an ontology, an essence, a nature of the way of being is a who I am.
Yes, exactly. So if you take a look in the transactional world that we live in, it's difficult to put in a element of existential. Who am I being in this midst that's more reactionary? There's very little conscious view underneath their actions that people are taking. They don't, as you can tell right now in our political environment, no one knows what they're doing. And everyone's got an opinion about it, but the actions that everybody's taking are ineffective. And that's obvious. So to become effective, the first thing about one of the elements to move from older to elder is become responsible of who you are in the world, as opposed to a victim. And I'm being treated this way. And, no one's invited me to the meetings anymore and all that stuff that goes on. Are you worthy enough to be seen in that way? I think one of the examples I might have been with you, I say, who would I be if I sat down on a bench with Albert Einstein? How would I be inside of that relationship if that was really Albert? How would I react? How would I listen? What would be my questions? Would I be the smart aleck kid? No. Would I be the successful businessman? No. Would I be the family man? No. Who would I be inside of that conversation? And that's an elder over there.
Yeah, that's my little reading of Einstein is he's as much wisdom-oriented philosopher as he is physicist. He just has such a grand view of life. I love, I'm going to write on this quote. I do blogs, weekly blogs, and I want to write on this one. Imagination is more important than knowledge because knowledge is limited to a set of ideals, and imagination, it is limited. Imagination knows no limit.
Yeah, my favorite quote of Einstein, it's not what you know, it's what you understand. That's my favorite. It's like, oh, okay. Do I understand me? Do I really understand, what causes me to do that and think that? So there's a whole thing that elders practice to move themselves away from being mind controlled. And that means that your mind spews 50,000 to 90,000 thoughts a day, and most of them you don't even see. It's like a ticker tape just running through your head. But those thoughts end up in behaviors, responses, emotional responses, and actions. And most people don't want to know where I got that one from and why I used that one. Is that useful for me? Is that appropriate for me? What does that cause in other people? So most people are irresponsible. Elders are very responsible. They're sensitive to that which is occurring not only over there, but over here in response to what's occurring in the middle. And their job is to alter that in such a way that who's over on the other side changes who they are. And
so
that's
what would your advice
do.
be? It's time for a wrap up now. We've been about an hour. What would and let's not use the word advice since I'm not happy with that word, but what would be your suggestions for both younger people and older people in either participating or appreciating the value of elderhood?
And it would begin with you appreciating yourself as an elder. And then the broadcast would be obvious. Who you would be speaks louder than what you say or do. Become an elder. Go through a process of really understanding the things you have to learn, change, alter, become an elder. And then that would give you a world where elder would be available for you. You have to be responsible. So one of the key states, as you said, is self-understanding, self-awareness, consciousness of yourself. So that would be what the first practice you would do to become an elder. It's like, oh, okay, I wonder, and there are plenty of resources out there to do that. This is, you become your own AI. That's what happens. You have to go underneath it and underneath it and underneath it until things are revealed. And so the first step is you. Become an elder.
I love that. That is such great advice. Marc Cooper, I, as I said in our pre-conversation, I just don't know many people I could have this conversation with. And it has been totally delightful, totally enlightening. You have new and creative ideas. You take my ideas that I've always thought were very cool, and you've showed me there's maybe an alternative wisdom to that I love. Thank you for that.
You are so welcome. I have a little advice for you. You say, there's not many people I could have this conversation with. I'll hold that as impediment, even though you're doing these websites. I mean, podcasts. Yeah, I think you're getting the word out. I think you're having these conversations. It's expanding. I would call on you to do some more in different ways that would reach more people. Having a group would be if I would be coaching you as an elder, you need your elder council. You need to sit in the kiva and the fire and the 13 people around the circle. And
I would love that. I would love that.
Well, go create that. You have the opportunity. You've talked to a lot of people. Invite them into a virtual kiva, into a place, and do exactly what you just said, which is practice your eldership. It's like anything else. If you don't practice, it goes away. This call for me is a practice of my eldership. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I also I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a total pleasure. And I also want to thank everybody for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.